and welcome to the workshop session of Track 2, Computing, Engineering and Technology. Theme 2, Organization Change, Mitigating Limitations for Capacity Building. And topic 2 is defining, defining and achieving institutional effectiveness for transformational education. I am Muhammad Behra Jalil, Assistant Professor at United International University, Dhaka, Bangladesh. He is the moderator for today, for these sessions actually. The session is of 2 hours, including question answers. We have 2 distinguished resource persons as speakers for the workshop. Each speaker will have approximately 1 hour for his presentations. We will take 3 breaks, and after the breaks, we'll have the question answer sessions. I will notify the speaker at 30 minutes how much time is remaining for the each sessions. Okay, our first presenter is Dr. Alfredo Suiro. Dr. Alfredo Suiro is a civil engineer, University of Porto, associate professor at University of Porto, former prorector of University of Porto, and he completed his PhD from University of Florida. He is the president of International Association for Continuing Engineering Education, IACEE, AUPEC, and of European Society for Engineering Education, SEFI. Dr. Alberto is General Secretary of Association of European Civil Engineering Faculties, AECEF. He is prestigious member of the Management of Board of European Distance and E-Learning Network Digital Learning Europe, EDEN DLE. Expert, European Quality Assurance in Vocational Education and Training. Expert, evaluator as a publication of National Agency, Erasmus Plus 2021 to up to 2027. Besides, Dr. Surio is also members, coordinator and reviewer of a number of renowned committees, societies, and scientific journals. We welcome Dr. Surio to begin presentations. Sir?
Hello. Thank you, Professor Muhammad Behra Jalil, for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation for being here. I'm very glad to talk about something that I think it's very important for professors and students, for the academic community. It's a big concern how to choose the assessment techniques to verify the competences and the learning outcomes of the graduates. So here I'm presenting a PhD thesis I supervised some years ago about building a model precisely about this important alignment of learning outcomes with different assessment techniques. As you can imagine, we have many types of learning outcomes, especially in the higher education area, and to verify if the learning has been made, we have to choose proper assessment techniques, and that's what this model that I'm starting the presentation will address. So what should we assess? How do we know what the students learn? How do we know that they have learned? There's a lot of faith from the part of the teachers in terms of the effectiveness of the assessment methods they use to verify the learning of each student. It's very difficult problem, very personal problem. I remember in a session, a very big session where we discussed this issue, there was a saying. They said that it was from Chinese professor, I don't know. But the saying is probably true. If you find 1,000 teachers, you'll probably find 1,000 assessment methods. So this question of assessing is really very personal, very emotional. I was surprised in the years of research I have dedicated to this issue, how personal this issue is for professors, and how sensitive is for students, because some students, when they arrive in a program, the first thing they ask is, how are the exams? How are you going to make the assessment? Am I going to be evaluated? So it's critical both for the students and for the teachers that want to be sure that their graduates have learned what they were supposed to. So this is what was dealt in this PhD that originated a project that I'll talk later about it. But the point is that how do we do this? How do we choose our assessment techniques? And after all, this is important. You think about this, because sometimes we go in the wrong direction. First, we decide the content, and then we decide what are the assessment techniques to be used. And probably these things have to be done together. We have to find proper assessment and teaching and learning activities that will deliver proper learning outcomes, the intended learning outcomes, so we can assess the learning outcomes that we want to verify with our graduates. So this was the question, the research question for my PhD student. She's not working in teaching anymore. She would love to teach, but she's now director of the International Relations Office of a big university here in Portugal. But she did this thesis that originated a project funded by the European Commission. That's why I have on the right lower corner the mentioning to this project, Tallow. And the question is, what is the impact of this approach, of this model to check the learning outcomes? One, we have to ensure that our graduates have the right knowledge, the right skills, and the right competences. And they are all different in terms of factual and tacitol knowledge. They are all different. So you cannot assess knowledge in the same way as you evaluate a skill or you evaluate a competence. In terms of, and competencies here are in the sense of attitudes, autonomy, and responsibility. So we have to verify the qualification of our graduates before they go into society and perform their duties as skilled and properly trained professionals. And on the other hand, this question of ensuring that the graduates have the proper set of learning outcomes also facilitates the mobility. Mobility is something that has become, in a world that we live, a global issue. Of course, the pandemic affected some of it, but it's coming back to normal. But you also have virtual mobility during the pandemic. So you have people working in the United States for companies in Asia and vice versa. And you need recognition. And that recognition of the capacity of our graduates is essential for something that it's the quality. And in certain cases, for regulated professions, like doctors or engineers or lawyers, the proper accreditation. So this is directly related with quality. We need to have proper verification of what the graduates have learned during their higher education school path. And to do that, we have to use the proper methods. And of course, this is a concern about students. I don't think that this question of proper evaluation is, how do I say, important for teachers and relevant in terms of knowing that they are being effective. But for the students, it's a big concern. The way they are assessed brings lots of sleepless nights and anxiety and other forms of evidencing stress because of the way they are being assessed. And it is important that we have to think about the fairness to the students, to evaluate them properly and according to what we intend them to know. We cannot, how do I say, consider that as a minor preoccupation for teachers, but it's probably these concerns on the students that motivated this concern about assessing the proper learning outcomes. So I don't know how much you know about this assessment of higher education learning outcomes by the OECD. Though it was an initiative, the AHELO initiative. It was an initiative of the OECD to somehow use the same system as the PISA evaluation of the higher education and primary education results in several countries around the world to, let's say, extend the same approach to higher education. And in that respect, engineering was one, economy was another, and let's say, to do this around the world, one of the things that the OECD decided was, what are learning outcomes? And here is a definition that we adopted in this lower model and in the project, is that they are statements of what a learner is expected to know, understand, or be able to demonstrate after completion of learning. And again, this was intended to be the learning outcomes, a way to express the reason why graduates are in higher education. Sometimes students are there and they have to know why they are there. And we have to be clear to the graduates what will be the gain, the learning outcomes they will learn after spending 4, 3, 4, 5 years attending university. I think it's only fair that for the system that we express clearly what will they be capable of doing because of what they learn during this longer process of several years at the university or another higher education institution. And the assessment. This is, let's say, a definition by Brown and all that provided the proposal for this alignment between learning outcomes, the different type of learning outcomes, and the different type of assessment is a very broad procedure to estimate student learning for whatever purpose we have. And of course, we have here an adaptation that resulted from the pandemic situation where all of us had to teach online. That in some cases, or in most cases, it depends on the country and the institution, the virtual assessment has used a definition here, but JISC definition from the UK. It's the use of ICT and the internet for the assessment of learning, including design, delivery, or recording of responses. Now, the point is that the main difficulty of this model, the ALOA model, is this alignment that Anderson and all this has established, that it is the level of correspondence between the objectives, the learning outcomes, the intended learning outcomes, the instruction we produce, and the assessment. We have to align these three areas to have a proper set of teaching and learning during our courses and our programs. Now, the model is this one. You have certain countries, I know that in Asian countries and European countries, qualification frameworks are, let's say, used to define professions and to define requirements to be in the market working in certain areas. Now, from that learning outcomes in the qualification frameworks, we derive the learning outcomes in the programs of the institutions, and then for the disciplines or courses. So we go from a higher level to the level where the professor has responsibility and some possibility of intervention. And of course, how are we going to perform the alignment? We have to know the assessment methods available. Now, if we are working virtually or electronically, we have certain assessments techniques that are possible, some others are not. But from there, we have to align the assessment methods and the learning outcomes in courses. And that's where the, let's say, the translation between these three areas was made using the Bloom revised taxonomy. And I'll explain why. Looking at the Bloom revised taxonomy, for instance, what is a learning outcome? One of them is this one, where the student should be able to describe the main component of a personal computer. You have a verb that somehow establishes the level of the cognitive process in the revised Bloom taxonomy, and you have the noun or the knowledge or the skill or the attitude that you want to reproduce in the learning outcome. So looking at the teacher, and I'm not only talking about new teachers that are coming to the profession, I'm talking about all the teachers. We need help. Most of us didn't have training. I'm talking by the cases I know, by myself and others. When we started teaching, nobody told us how to organize our learning activities, our content, our assessments. So we need more training, more CPD, more lifelong learning for teachers, for instance, on how to define a course. And a teacher that comes as new or with a new course or as a new professor has here 5 phases that are recommended. First of all, is to try to define what will be the result of a semester of work for this course. So write the learning outcome statements. Define the content. Afterwards, most of the times, as far as I know, I'm old, so I've seen many courses, many teachers, many programs. Generally, the courses are defined by content, and learning outcomes are most of the times indirect or not explicitly stated. But I think that it should be the other way around. I think we should start with the learning outcome statements, then the content, then the learning activities to pass the content to the graduates, then define the assessment and verify the alignment. I mean, we have to be sure that the type of assessment techniques are verifying the knowledge, the skills, and the attitudes of the graduates. And that is what has been done in this model, the ALOA model, assessing learning outcomes, activities, and what is important are these 2 perspectives from the teacher and from the student. From the teacher, the natural flow is this one: learning outcomes, teaching and learning activities, and then the assessment. For the student, they are concerned mostly with assessment, and then they think about the learning outcomes that they need to fulfill the assessment, and about the teaching and learning activities that they will share with their teacher and be engaged. So here are some examples of the, let's say, the way that we can verify I've seen some sessions in the morning. There were some examples of applying these assessment methods. But as you can see, one of them that it's very used around the world is the multiple choice questions that we have, for instance, in the TOEFL and the other worldwide assessment techniques to verify the competencies or the knowledge and skills of some graduates. And multiple choice questions are here with the division of the revised Bloom taxonomy. The lowest one, which is the remember, then a higher level with the understand, and we can ask the graduate to compare, contrast, demonstrate, etc. These are all, how do I say, these are all, sorry, I went too quick. These are all possibilities when you have a multiple choice question for this level of the revised Bloom taxonomy. And apply. Apply is already a skill, right? You are already somehow transforming your knowledge into concrete actions like build or make use of, solve, etc. So the other 3 levels for the multiple choice questions of sophistication is the analyze and to make critical thinking about certain issues. So be able to somehow judge whatever you present to the graduates. The 5th one is the evaluate. You can ask them to make judgments, how to measure, how to compare, how to recommend. And the last one, which is the most difficult one to implement in a multiple choice question, and the highest level of sophistication in the revised Bloom taxonomy in terms of tacitone knowledge is to create. How do you create? You can ask them to design, to invent, to originate, to innovate, and that's the lowest level, the highest level, sorry. Very difficult to implement, but also the highest level of the assessment in multiple choice questions. Now, another way to evaluate students are essays, and sometimes there are, how do I say, different types of essays with different techniques. I've been warned that I'm on the 5-minute margin to finish, so just bear in mind that essays may have different types and different intents in terms of learning outcomes. Another way is the problem solving. You may ask open-ended questions, or to somehow generate a diagnosis of a situation, and ask for the graduate to show the way they can apply their learning outcomes. And then there's practical work. This practical work is very common in the assessment of students, as you know, graduates, the homeworks and the final projects, and it is something that you can use in 2 dimensions, like it's shown here, a demonstration, and on the other hand, to experiment, to make them implement, exercise their knowledge in a specific case. You also have a structure inquiry, where you inquire about specific topics, or an open inquiry with open, let's say, open options for the graduate. And of course, there's also the final project or CAP work. You have also short answer questions, where you just expect the graduate to formulate very short answers about the specific issue. And you have taking into account that there are different learning styles. You probably know the Call theory about learning styles, and you can also prepare assessments according to the learning styles of the different students. My impression after all these years is that the assessment we use, one size fits all, because we make the same exam or same test or same approach to all students, doesn't fit all. Some learn in different ways and can express their competencies in different ways. And this is what I wanted to say. My second part will be more about the tool, the Tallow tool, but this is just to show you the theoretical background of what was done in that project. So thank you, and I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Dr. Alfredo. It was very, very informative. In fact, I may have many questions to ask, but I think we'll wait for the questions, answer sessions near the end. So we will take a short break, and it was quite very informative, and many of it raised certain questions which definitely would interest many of our attendees. So the attendees, I've already shared that in Vertex. If you have any questions, you can type away. But remember, there are 2 tabs, discussion and questions tab in the Vertex. So if you have questions, please write down. We will address these questions near the end, and I'm sure both together we'll be able to solve many of our problems. So let's take a break, gentlemen. How about 5 minutes? I think we need to catch up, and then we will have our second speaker coming up, inshallah. Okay, Farhan sir, Professor Farhan and Dr. Alfredo. Okay, take care. So let's take 5 minutes. We meet yourself and we'll be, inshallah, back in 5 minutes. Okay. Yes, welcome back. Can we hear each other?
Yes, we can. Yeah,
We
I can
can.
hear you.
Okay, good. Okay, so I think we are ready for the second of our presentation. So the title is Embracement of OBE for the ASEAN region through common framework. That's the title. And it will be presented by Professor Ahmed Farhan bin Muhammad Sadullah. He is the professor in transport from the School of Civil Engineering, University Saint Malaysia, USM. He was the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic and International between 2017-2021, and was responsible to ensure embracement and implementation of OBE at the University Saint Malaysia. He was also the Dean of School of Civil Engineering at USM and had led the team to implement OBE. He is also the coordinator for the civil engineering subject matter for 2 Erasmus Plus projects led by the Tuning Academy, which were centered around OBE. So we now welcome Professor Farhan to begin his presentation. Sorry, if you could start sharing your screen. Thank you.
Thank you. I shared my screen. Can you see the screen, Professor Feroz?
Yes, we can see.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Very good day wherever you are in the world. We are evening here in Malaysia. As have been introduced, I'm Professor Farhan from University Science Malaysia, and I will share the OBE experience perhaps from the perspective of an implementer and from the perspective of someone who have helped many to embrace OBE. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer for having me as a presenter, especially to my colleague, Professor Alfredo, for inviting me to be with him in this workshop. I am trying to tackle the topic of defining and achieving institutional effectiveness for transformational education through several work that we have done, in particular 2 projects that we were involved in. I will try to give a very brief overview of the 2 projects. The 2 projects are continuous to each other, and I hope our audience can appreciate what we went through. And if you have any interest, unfortunately, we were not able to involve many universities, but if you are interested in knowing more about what we have done, I will share my email towards the end for any additional discussion out of the any personal discussion that we can have. So I will just start by asserting why a common framework is needed. We'll be surprised that even though the whole conference today, the summit, is talking about OBE, the embracement and practice is still somewhat varied across the world. Even though we have started the process quite some time ago through the Bologna process, especially in Europe, and then the entire world followed through with national qualification frameworks. I was looking into the history. The work on qualification framework started as early as the year 2000, and South Africa was one of the early advocate of frameworks. Then I am a civil engineer like Alfredo, the engineering academic program, then quickly actually use the framework to regulate all the engineering education in the world, and many were sort of brought into and embrace OBE. But having said that, there are still many of our friends in the world who have yet to be regular in OBE education. And I would like to share with you our journey through these two projects. Okay, so that's a bit about common framework. And this is just a framework that to show how the two projects are connected. The first project actually started back in the year 2017, and the Tuning Academy in the University of Deusto in Spain got the Erasmus Plus project, and their intention is actually to introduce OBE through the tuning method. And in that project, we had non-embracer, we had universities who have not, who are alien to OBE. We have some universities who are new to OBE and some who are already embracing and practicing OBE. So it was a good mix, and it was a good platform for us to be mentors and mentee in OBE. And again, the outcome of OBE by the proponents of tuning and the project is to encourage mobility and mutual recognition for equal quality standard. So that is basically why we want more people, more universities to embrace OBE, so that we have a more worldwide mobility and mutual recognition for world, a world audience for our education, higher education system. So we went through the tuning methodology, which I will explain briefly afterwards. And towards the end, at the end of 2019, we have identified some shortcomings of course, in a project, we were not able to do everything within the constraints of the project. So we have identified some possibilities, opportunities from the weaknesses and shortcomings of the project. We have proposed to the Tuning Academy, and Tuning Academy responded very positively, and they actually applied for another project in the next round. And we were very happy to be able to actually continue with a follow-up project called Tallow, stand for Measuring and Comparing Achievements of Learning Outcomes in Higher Education in Asia. I think this is where my presentation and Professor Alfredo's presentation earlier and after this has similarities in terms of the measurement of learning outcomes through assessment. The Kelohia project is a 3-year project. It has 3 elements, which I will also share with you. The beauty of the Kelohia project is that it is smack in the middle of the COVID-19 experience, and we are now able to actually compare between the face-to-face pre-COVID, the online learning during COVID, and the new norm of teaching and learning post-COVID, which is at the moment. So that is what I'm going to cover today. And let me quickly go into the first project. The project is called the TASE, the Tuning Asia Southeast Project. It is an Erasmus Plus project, and the ASEAN University Network, AUN, is a collaborator for this project. So this is why many of our friends from Southeast Asia and Asia have the opportunity to actually continue to do this project to embrace OBE. For your information, tuning is not only in Southeast Asia. The Tuning Academy has done similar projects in all parts of the world. So quickly, what is tuning? Basically, tuning is another form of outcome-based education, and the Tuning Academy has introduced the methodology, or the tuning methodology, to help embracement of OBE, more widespread embracement of OBE. In a way, it is providing our students with the best learning experience by design, and you will see the methodology emphasizes on design as well as on implementation. So when we were involved in the project, we keep asking why the word tuning. And after we have completed the first project, this was a slide that I took from my presentation as the coordinator of civil engineering for the project. through my understanding of why tuning was used, and the team of the Tuning Academy sort of agreed to it. So I feel this would be useful for our friends who are new to OBE. So tuning is the will to tune your academic offerings to the needs of the students. This is a very important mindset change for OBE, and that's why OBE stands for outcome-based education. It is actually the outcome of the students, not what we as academics and as instructors decide, which was the way we do things before OBE. So the will to tune your academic challenge, academic offering is the first move that we need to take as we journey into OBE. Number two, the humility to tune your ego, okay? Because this is something that we will face as a practitioner, especially if you are new and you have to change your team towards OBE. We all have to go through this changing of your ego so that you know that you are preparing and designing the academic program for the students and not for yourself, okay? So that is to ensure relevance. And number three, the ability to design your academic program to the tune and the needs of our students. So having prescribed and having identified the needs of the students, you then need to design it accordingly. And finally, the discipline to deliver that what you have designed. That is very important, not only to design the program, the academic program, but to actually deliver it and also to measure the attainment of the outcomes, because you want to make sure that your graduates will be tuned. So that's in a nutshell what tuning is all about. I was actually educated through the engineering OBE approach, and then I was introduced to tuning. So tuning looks to be a very useful complementary approach to me, to those who have already embraced OBE. But for those who are new, I feel tuning is a good way to introduce you to OBE. So ladies and gentlemen, tuning ensures that our students are being educated to be a human being. So through competencies, we are tackling both the specific and the generic competencies or outcomes. And therefore, we are not only educating them, nurturing them to be in the profession that they took, but generally we want them to be a good human being, a good citizen of the community. A person with the right character and competency, this is very important. This is a universal ideal and goal that we wish through our higher education system. Then of course, finally, a graduate that will flourish in his or her profession of choice. And I think the disruptive nature of the 4IR, the challenges of the present and the future is actually requesting or demanding our students and our graduates to be more versatile as the employment profile do change, and we are seeing that a lot of our graduates have to adapt to new surroundings and new employment opportunities, not necessarily in the area that they were trained for. So this is why tuning and OBE is important to achieve that. So this is the members of the TASE project, 11 universities across ASEAN countries. There are 3 subject domains: civil engineering, medicine, teachers education, and I'm going to share the civil engineering domain, which I am involved in. I was the coordinator and Alfredo, my colleague, was the advisor. So that's how we met, and that's how our friendship has developed over the years. So this is the TASE's experience. It involved consulting because you need to engage stakeholders before you can determine the competencies that you would want your graduates to achieve at the end of the education. So there is a period of consulting that is important so that you are relevant, your programs are relevant, and your graduates are also relevant. Then there is a process of doing some profiling, all right, and designing, okay? So in TASE, these 3 steps were actually executed by all of the participating university. And one university, which was my university, University of Science Malaysia, was asked to be the implementing university as a pilot, so that we can actually go through some learning process by the student after the design has completed, some form of evaluation, and followed by a quality improvement step through enhancing of the whole process. So this was what we went through over the 3-year period of the project. And we defined competencies, generic and specific. These are generic competencies. We did this across the 3 subject domain. So this basically is trying to represent the universal values and the universal outcomes and attributes or competencies for all graduates of higher education. And as you can see, these are mainly skills that are required for our students to survive and also to be a good worker and a good citizen of the future and of the present. We then went on to have our specific competencies. I purposely put several versions of it to show that there were several steps that we had to go through the consultation process, through our own self-evaluation of its relevance and how it will fit to the program. So we came up with 14 specific competencies for the civil engineering program, and previously we had 13 competencies that we are planning or that we will use as our target when we design our program. Okay, so this is the competencies part. From the competencies, the tuning methodology introduced a concept or a step which we feel is to bring some philosophy to your academic design. Remember, this is a civil engineering program, but we had to bring some philosophy to it so that there are meaning to what we are doing, and this is called meta profiling in tuning. And this is the step that we took. We look into the present and the future demand of the world, the future uncertainties, the 21st century challenges, the 4th industrial revolution, and also the sustainable development goals. Okay, and we try to look into the skill sets that we would like or the attributes that we would like our graduates to have. So not only we want them to have the knowledge, we know that as a civil engineer, they require the skills. So there are 2 skills that we would like them to have: the thinking skills, because that is very important for them to survive, and also the interpersonal skills. And values, being a professional program, the values need to be as well entrenched in the whole program. So this is the philosophy side, and we try to put it in a diagram form so that we can explain the different competencies, how they actually overlap or they are having several dimensions and so on. This is just an exercise so that we can do the following. And what we did was to rank and to rate the competencies accordingly, according to whether it is actually they are in the social skills domain, technical skills domain, personal skills domain, or values. And we also try to put the degree of importance, so that when we look at the design of the academic program, when we do the alignment between the outcomes of the courses to the attributes or to the competencies, we can see we shall ensure that the design will make sure that all the competencies that are high in importance are being addressed by as many course outcomes as possible. Okay, so that was the purpose of doing so. So we did that for all the competencies, and we went through 10 steps. These are the steps that were introduced in the tuning approach. And these are things that we actually do normally in any of the design of our program. We went through from the beginning up to the meta profiling, and then come up with the programs, the learning outcomes, and determining the assessment, making sure that they are aligned, and then we are ready to launch. Okay, so this is the design process, something that all the universities went through, and were able to either come up with a new program or to modify their existing program. And the modification of the existing program perhaps involve transforming an old program which is not OBE to a new program which is OBE. So that was what we were able to achieve through our activities. And these are actually a summary at the end of the project, where we went back to the 6 steps of tuning, and we try to summarize what we have achieved and what were the shortcomings of what we have done. Okay, so if you see in red, these are actually points that we put up at the closure of the TASE project, with the hope that the Tuning Academy shall go through, shall extend this to another project. Because we have a big brother, we have a senior, the European version of TASE, which have actually done this. And that's the reason why we said we also need to do this to complete the cycle of tuning. And we were very happy the Tuning Academy agreed with us and went for another proposal. And we got this project called Kelohia project, with the continuation from the TASE project. But this time it is led by the University of Groningen, which is the other half of the Tuning Academy. And again, ASEAN University Network, AUN, is a partner. So quickly, Kelohia stands for measuring. Okay, so measuring and comparing achievements of learning outcomes in higher education in Asia. It addresses the gaps in the TASE project. It enhances the mutual recognition of academic programs, because now not only we have the design and in the implementation, but we also will have the assessment component to it. So we hope that the mobility programs across ASEAN universities will be enhanced. Not only that, we also hope that we actually can encourage people to have mobility programs across the world, especially with Europe. Okay, so that is one of the positive outcomes. Our family has grown. Some have dropped. Okay, in fact, there was an official invitation by Tuning to the then existing projects or universities from TASE. So finally, 14 universities are part of the new project, Kelohia. And again, we are expanding. And some of them are also new in OBE, even though we are actually going deeper into the assessment part of OBE. And so there are three main parts of Kelohia. One is about coming up with a common framework, okay, for the universities across the region. And then we look into student workload measurement. And finally, we go into a specific assessment type called authentic assessment, to ensure that we are able to measure and compare achievements of learning outcomes better. So I will go into them detail. So first of all, we wanted to come up with a common qualification framework, and this was what we did. Okay, we actually compared available qualification framework among all the participating universities and countries, be it at the national level or at the university level, or any standards that are available. And as we are an engineering program, there are several standards that are available that we were able to refer to and compare. and make comparison. So that was the first thing that we did actually for this project. And from there, we came up to a draft of what we call to be our qualification framework, what we would like to propose to be our qualification framework. And in the design of the framework, we needed to identify dimensions and also sub-dimensions. As you can see in this table, these are similar to the competencies in TASE and similar to many of our learning outcomes for all our OBE programs. But under Kelohia, we are using dimensions and sub-dimensions. And as much as possible, the sub-dimension is trying to explain further the dimensions, okay? So for our team, the civil engineering team of Kelohia, we have 4 dimensions: learning and development, investigative towards solution, serving the society, and abilities and personality. And we had the various sub-dimensions accordingly, as you can see, to represent the entire array of attributes that we would love to have as part of our student competencies, our student learning outcomes, and the attributes that they will have as they graduate from our program. So it is similar to what we did in TASE, but it is using a new approach of a framework that we hope can be agreed to be a common one across civil engineering programs, across universities in Southeast Asia or Asia. What we have done along the way, since we have actually looked into all the qualification frameworks, we knew that we must make sure that they are aligned to the accreditation body's standards. Okay, that is very critical. We do not want to make life more difficult as it is. It's already tough for us to follow the accreditation requirement. So what we have made sure to happen is that it is positive, or is actually aligned fully to the accreditation standards. For example, to the Washington Accord requirement for many countries, for many engineering programs that are following and using the Washington Accord as their qualification standard. Okay, so what we did next was actually to detail the framework with narratives, explanation, so that we want our audience to really understand what we mean by it. Okay, and there are 3 domains: the knowledge domain, skills domains, and responsibilities domain. Okay, and each of them are attributes that are important to a civil engineer and to any graduate. The knowledge domain is very important. The skills, especially for professional program like ours, and responsibility is actually when they work. You know, when they work, they must carry this responsibility as part of an effective domain where they will need to translate all their knowledge and skills into action. And an action that will make them responsibility, that will turn knowledge into impact, that will actually make sure that the graduates are of value to the society. So that is how we explain the framework. Okay, and for each of the component of dimension and sub-dimensions, we created a narrative, and we are actually going through another round of verification. We have done verification with our students, with our academics. Now we are doing the verification with our alumni who has worked for several years, which are beyond the 3 to 5 years probation period, and also our employers and the professional bodies in our respective countries. So it goes through continuous verifications to make sure that the dimension and sub-dimensions are relevant, and the narratives are also helping people so that they can design their program accordingly. So quickly into the second dimension of this project, it is about students' workload. we also got to know that many universities are still not considering student workload in their academic program design, which has made our students to perhaps be given excessive amount of workload in terms of students' learning time, and they can be over, stressed because of that. There is also a problem of distribution of time. Usually the student workload will multiply towards the end of the semester, especially when in the teaching plan, we do not plan for a staggered distributed assessment, especially on the formative kind of assessment. We are still seeing many summative kind of assessment, which again are not well distributed across the semester. These are things that we are trying to introduce, especially to programs that are alien to the concept of incorporating students' workload. So, this is actually the outcome that we would like to wish from this project. And again, this is work in progress. We have actually done our first part. Now we are in the second part. The first part is actually from the perspective of the academic, from the perspective of the current design. Now we are actually going to have an interview with the students and also the lecturer to see whether they are in sync. All right. So that's what we are trying to do, and it is very important because the amount of workload, whether it is in class guided through lectures and so on, or outside class independent, are all of semester's work. And we would need to ensure that the students are having a very good learning experience, effective one, and we do not to give unnecessary workload. This is especially true when we had to go through, this is especially challenging when we had to go through the online learning for the past 2 years. So this is again another opportunity for us to assess face-to-face learning as well as online learning. And now I think many of us are also doing hybrid learning. And we would love to come up with findings that are useful to make sure that the student workload are something that is manageable and at the end of the day helpful for the students' learning outcome attainment. And again, here where there's a lot of assessment type, this is where Prof. Alfredo's work can be incorporated, because it also involves the design of our assessment and to make sure that the attainment are achieved, and most importantly, that the assessment are actually supporting the attainment of all our outcomes. So these are detail of the project. I shall go fast. So we have looked at the programs, the design of it, okay, through the framework. Then we have looked into the student workload. And the third part of Tallow here is actually to bring in the to experiment on what is called an authentic assessment, in addition to the other normal assessment which are both formative and summative. Authentic assessment is trying to bring realism to assessment. So this is RM3, or recognition mechanism 3, the third part of Tallow here, and this is where we try to incorporate authentic assessment as part of the best assessment to measure outcome attainment, and as much as possible, as many outcomes as possible. So these are some definition that we are trying to juggle through. We would like to bring realism into it, and imagine as a civil engineer, it's not going to be easy to bring the contracting work, the construction work into realism, but with technology, with creativity, we can actually bring parts of it into it. So we are trying to assess how much of our existing program are actually having elements of authentic assessment in it. And this is where the stage where we are now. Remember, this project is only halfway through. So we are trying to engage our partners, our colleagues in our program, in our faculty, and ask them whether they have elements of authentic assessment or not. And this is from my university, where to my surprise, they are actually practicing some of it already. But we need to they are actually trying to they have actually said that they have elements already. They have elements of authentic assessment, and this is how they see what they have done. Okay, and from our assessment of their response, I feel this is great because they have attempted to bring realism to their students' activities in class, either through teaching or through assessment. And as much as possible, if they are doing some design work, they will bring actual design works so that it is no longer something that is arbitrarily determined. And it has helped because our faculty members are also doing a lot of consultancy. They are doing actual work. They are involved either directly through our marketing arm to do consultancy, or they work with private consultancy. And with that, I think they have sufficient experience to bring the real world to our students' learning. So that is great. But again, at the moment, we are going to, because sometimes our colleagues would love to claim that they are doing these things, but what we want to do now is actually to see whether these are actual authentic assessment or it is actually semi-authentic assessment. Okay, but nevertheless, we are able to bring to teach our students with some real data, some real environment, but most of the time it is still simulated. It is still in an environment that is not real, okay, because it is not going to be easy to do it at site. But again, with the opportunities that 4IR is giving to us, we perhaps can do that, okay. And the challenge of authentic assessment for online learning is something that needs to be explored. It actually may be enhanced through technology, but I don't think we have enough data at the moment to know whether the learning outcomes will be equally effective. So I think this is something that I'm sure all of us will be interested to know, to experiment, and to actually confirm and come up with new ways of teaching and learning, various mixed ways, combine face-to-face, online, authentic, so that we can ensure that our students get the best teaching and learning, and they are able to use it to achieve all the learning outcomes. So I think that's sort of wrap up the authentic assessment. We have done the diagnosis just now. We will be sharing the experience from all the member universities in our next meeting, and we hope that out of that experience we will ascertain whether which is actually authentic or which is not authentic enough. And we hope to formulate a plan how we can actually assist others to implement authentic assessment in their academic program. And hopefully, authentic assessment will be more central as another form of assessment that we can use to ensure better attainment of learning outcomes for all our academic programs. So in conclusion, my dear colleagues, champions of OBE, the first project has actually helped us to understand what OBE is. We were able to help them to design a better academic program and improve one with OBE elements in it. And we were hoping that they are now actually implementing them already. Okay. And the second project came to come up with more effective ways to assess the attaining of students' learning outcomes, incorporation of working load as part of an important parameter in teaching and learning. And finally, we have the opportunity to also include the online learning as part of the 2 years that we have gone through it. And now with the hybrid learning that many are going through, I think many more new experience can be achieved. So ladies and gentlemen, I think that's the sharing that I would like to make and to have with you. As I said in the earlier part of the presentation, if any of one of you are interested to know more about this, I can share more. So there are more to what I presented, and I hope my presentation has actually added value to the session and to the conference. So Professor Behros, that's all from me. Thank you very much. I shall stop sharing, and perhaps we will have a good discussion after this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Farhan. It was, as expected, very absorbing. I think many of the things you shared quite a number of ways that has been done, and I'm sure it also raised a number of questions. And I think we'll be also eagerly waiting for your the session, next session, when you have that actual study that will show probably a more clear directions the OB is going. I mean, it is the ways you pointed out very correctly. There are non-embracer. I think that number is going to shrink day by day as they learn to be competitive to how this outcome-based works. That is there. So that is there. So thank you again. We had fantastic presentation from two of our speakers. So we will start with the second sessions, but I think we need to give Dr. Farhan a break, so a well-deserved break. And so, Dr. Alfredo will be starting maybe inshallah in 5 minutes, so we come back and join. And again, asking our attendees, if such a lovely sessions, we would expect some questions. If you have, we can attend to these questions near the end of the sessions after Dr. Alfredo presents. So let's take a break for 5 minutes. Speakers? Okay, thank you. Hello, sir. Back again.
Hi. Yeah.
Wait for Professor Farhan. Is he here?
I'm sure.
Okay. Okay. So I think both of you presented so nicely. You're still waiting for some questions. Otherwise, I'm going to raise some questions. I have pretty interesting sessions. Professor Farhan had a break. It was a very involved sessions, a lot of presentations, everything. Okay. So again, Dr. Alfredo, I mean, the show is yours, and you have the time. So since we are very much on time, so take away. So please, you're welcome to start sharing your screen. So.
Very good. Good to be back. And hello again, everyone. Thank you, Professor Ahmad, for the presentation. My presentation is short. I'm going to tell you to complement Professor Ahmad Farhan's presentation, what is expected from Tallow, and we'll present an example of the utilization of the web tool Tallow precisely to meet this comparison of the learning outcomes with the proper assessment. So what is expected from this project Tallow and Tallow Asia and Tallow Extension? Are recent projects funded by the European Commission, where basically what is intended is that we have for the different disciplines a set of learning outcomes descriptors that can then be used as rubrics or not for building assessment frameworks on how we can verify if the learning was achieved or not of those learning outcomes and competences. So there is, let's say, like Professor Ahmad Farhan mentioned, an assessment model, authentic assessment model that we want to produce for different disciplines, and also a reference framework for civic, social, and cultural engagement. Basically, those are the goals and the objectives of the Tuning Academy, translated into or applied to the different Tallow projects around the world. Let me tell you that the tuning approach has been used in all continents, Asia, Australia, Africa, South America, North America, and I personally was involved in the tuning for China with the Ministry of Education in China. So this is an approach that has, let's say, been used in several parts of the world. And in this Tallow, the European, you heard about the Tallow Asia. Now the Tallow in Europe, we are looking at 5 disciplines: civil engineering, teacher education, history, nursing, and physics. And for instance, the dimensions vary from discipline to discipline. The civil engineering has 9, different from the one in Asia. Teacher education is 6, history is 7, nursing is only 5, and physics as 8. And these are the dimensions that were considered for each one of these topics with the respective descriptors and then the assessment methods. This is how the model can be shown in a flowchart. Once you define the qualification frameworks for the different areas with the establishment of a common body of knowledge, skills, and attitudes or wider competences, you then find or try to find the diagnostic assessments. The publications are in the website of the project. You can consult and you can see what was produced for these different areas. Now, is this a simple problem? I always show this when discussing this subject. I don't think so. It's very difficult, either for the teachers and also for the students, because you need some help. And that's what this Tallow project, while implementing the ALOA model, has produced. It's a free web tool. Everybody can use it. If you go to the website, you can find it. And there were certain issues about writing learning outcomes. There are some recommendations on how to write learning outcomes, but we couldn't find a way that could decide or propose to teachers to write their learning outcomes. So the project, the web tool, to implement the ALOA model, just suggests that anyone can write the learning outcome in the way each teacher or each director of the program wants to write the learning outcome. That's the step one. And when you find that, when you do that, you write it in the language you prefer, but always with a verb, because the learning outcomes are associated with actions, like we have seen in the first presentation. And then when you do that, you ask for advice. This is not black and white approach to this issue, because like I mentioned in the first proposal, and Professor Ahmad Farhan also underlined, there are different ways of looking at assessments, and each professor and each program director or dean has its own approaches, and we have to be careful with that, because we're just proposing something. And here, for instance, is an example of a learning outcome. Explain the difference between metals and non-metals. And what you do with after you write the learning outcome, you choose the level of the revised Bloom taxonomy that you think that it's connected with explain. And when you have explain, you probably choose the dimension on one hand, remember, because you need to know what is a metal and non-metal. And at the same time, you have to understand the differences and explain. Somehow you evaluate. And for each one of the dimensions of the revised or levels of the revised Bloom taxonomy, you choose, there are several options for the verbs that are associated with each one of the levels, and you just put a cross in the one that you think adequates better or fits better the type of learning outcome. And like I said, this is an advice. And what the web tool, I mean, I can explain or not explain because it's not easy, but I can tell you that there was a lot of difficulties in trying to find the assessment, because it's a multidimensional matrix that correlates not only the type of learning outcomes and the strong verbs associated with the learning outcome, and the possibilities of the assessment methods and how they are connected, according to Anderson et al., connected with the type of learning outcome. So it was not easy. So we found an algorithm that defines the three best or three more suited assessment techniques that fit your interpretation of the type of learning outcome. And then the result, I have here an example, for instance, decision making. And you have here the descriptor levels and the assessment approaches connected with this descriptor. For instance, for the knowledge, you can use essays, you can use problem solving or practical work. For the skills, essays again, problem solving, practical work, or for the attitudes or wider competencies, problem solving, practical work, or reflective practice assignments. So this is what comes out of the web tool. And according to the teacher preferences or the director of the program opinion, you may choose the assessment. You're probably not going to use the three. You may use the three if you want, for instance, to satisfy the different type of learning styles of your students. I'm sure that very few of you wants to know the learning styles of your students. And believe me, I have done it for some years with my students. There are many differences according to Kolb. And sometimes in one year, one of them prevails and the other prevails in another. So you have to think about your students. Again, like Professor Ahmad Farhan and I underlined in the first part, the focus is on the students. So think about it and choose the assessment method that not only fits your students, but also fits your own way of teaching and learning. So this is all I wanted to say. I promised I was going to be short. This is all I wanted to say. Everything or lots of things are here, and you can now go to the question and answers that I hope that are many. So, because this is not easy, this is not, how do I say, black and white. And I'm sure that there are differences of opinions, there are interrogations about certain issues, and also some critiques or comments. So up to you now. Thank you very much. Again, thank you to Professor Ahmad, to Professor Mohammad Beros for the help, and also thank you for the organization to give us the opportunity to talk about something that we are very fond of and we want to promote. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alfredo Suriero. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Okay.
So it's difficult even in my own language, so don't worry.
And I thought my name was difficult anyway, so that's the thing. So I think both of us are good. So again, a very, very, very absorbing session, and a lot of angles that has been covered. So we, unfortunately, in the vertical, I can't see much question being. You people have done a fantastic job. I think everything is very clear to them. So I'm looking at the question section. We don't have much of a question. I think it is very clear to both most of the attendees who attended these sessions. One thing I would like to know, you have shared your email address. So if some of them wants to be in touch, I think that is also available in the Zoom, in the Vertex. So I think if they have some queries, they would be in touch. So that is there. So we have kind of reached the end, but I have actually, I want to ask you a question, if it's okay with both of you. Certain things, since it's very rare to have, where we have two of the very rich scholars in this field. Professor, Dr. Alfredo, one of the things you have said about fitting the students individual rather than going a blank in a common assessment. That's one of the angles you have talked about. My question is, how do you address the administrative issue? I mean, that's one thing I think even Professor Farhan would be also asking, like administrative requirement, there is a fixed number of text and quiz and certain guidelines being given. But when you want to address, deal with individual student a different assessment, how to handle that kind of scenario?
I'll go first, and then Professor Ahmad Farhan will go second. Is that okay? Yeah, personally, I mixed different types of assessments during the whole course. I mean, it's a mixed type of assessment continuously done during the semester, and then discretely, either with tests or with the exam at the end. And I mixed everything, and I used something that I after all these years, like I said, I'm old or experienced, it depends on the point of view, but I'm old. And one of the things I've learned is that each student is a person, he's not a number. And what I do with all of them, I talk with all of them during the semester about their homeworks, about their performance. And I insist on doing that because they are all different. They all have, how do I say, different problems, different issues, different modes of understanding what is intended, for instance. And you have to talk with them individually. I go to the end of the room and I call each one of them one by one and I talk with them. So that's something that I do to take care a little bit of this diversity of learning styles, besides the diversity of assessment methods.
Thank you. Professor Farhan, you want to add?
Yeah, okay, if I can add, I mean, it is a challenge if the class is big, no doubt. But I think what is important is for us to do the continual quality improvement at all levels. We usually do it at program level. We seldom do it at course level. We even more seldom and more not often to do it at student level. So I think when we do assessment, we need to go down to each individual student's ability to attain all the outcomes that have been prescribed for that course individually. We have not gone into different assessment type for different students. We are still practicing one assessment, well, the common assessment type for all who are taking a certain class. But what we have done is we are able to assess their attainment individually, right? The reason being, we can intervene, as we know if any individual student has not achieved the outcomes for certain learning outcomes, we can then intervene accordingly before they go to the next level. That is the intention. But as I've said, the challenge is when the class is big. So again, we need to facilitate this because the old mindset is all about big classes, big lecture halls. Okay, the new way of teaching and learning are more personalized. And I think in a way, online learning has helped. Yeah. Because all the LMS, the learning management systems, are actually making us closer to individualism. I shall use a different word, to individual kind of monitoring. In a way, it's tougher because the students can have access to you anytime. Okay, and I can imagine if you have students global with all the different time zones. But that is the new challenge. But again, it is giving a new dimension of assessment. So in a way, what we are doing is halfway of what Alfredo has done, because I'm also amazed when I see how Alfredo's commitment to students' development is amazing. But I can only give the excuse that perhaps the number of students that he has compared to us in the lower income countries are totally different. I'm sure, Brother Barrel, you agree with me.
Yeah, I agree with you. Sorry,
our seniority is what Alfredo and Professor Ferran's and Professor Ferran and Barros, that's the difference between them. So it's going one step more there, so you can understand the scenario.
Well, you have to try. I mean, you have to try and think about it. One of the things, I mean, two things that I guess I should say to finish this question. One is that Professor Ahmad Farhan's school has a very interesting method of following up. He didn't talk about it, but they have a very interesting. I was impressed with what they do in University of Saints with this following up of each student. He may talk about it better than I do, but believe me, it's something that should be used in other schools. The other thing is that when we have too many students, what I do is use the e-portfolio. I mean, the students have to write the portfolio about the competences, the problems they have. They do it weekly or bi-weekly, and they write in the portfolio what they had learned, what competences they learned, and the evidences of what they learned. And then you can check, even if there are many students, you can do it after hours. You can check the e-portfolio of each student. So that's another way of following up what each student is learning in each week or each class. So those are my two comments.
Okay, good. Very interesting. I mean, nice to know from the various perspectives. Very related to this, maybe we are reaching the end, but still, one of the things beside this number of class size, my question, especially to Professor Ferran, usually university has its own rules and regulations regarding assessment process and criteria. Maybe a bit more freedom is given to Dr. Alfredo's environment and much more stricter. So in this rigidness, the addressing variety you want to try, you know, this student should be assessed this way. That is a big challenge, how you handle that. And second, I think a challenge I'm facing over here, and I'm sure all of you are also facing, is the workload that goes into when you go into this kind of accreditation program. And so mindset, even if you're an embracer, I mean, the time slot between taking class and how do you address these two challenges, administrative and workload?
Yeah, maybe Alfredo, I'll go first. that was my job for the university. I was the deputy vice chancellor, University Science Malaysia. We have we are a comprehensive university, so OBE was norm to us engineers, but not the norm for the others. So I had to convince the rest of the university that OBE is the way forward. This is despite the Malaysian qualification framework has actually used OBE for many years. So we were still a laggard. We are still behind for the other programs. The engineering programs we have no problem, but the other program, especially the non-professional programs, we had some issues. So, but that's where we have to be a bit philosophical. We need them to understand why we need to do OBE. We cannot actually be dictating all the way. So we feel from experience, it has to come from their own will. They know that this is good for their student, this is good for the program. I think that's the first thing to do. But the old guards, the senior ones, they will not want to change. And unfortunately, the Senate of the university is usually filled with the senior guys. Okay, so to win the heart of the Senate of the university is a big hurdle. But I guess we have to do it. All right. Then the workload of us as the academic and the administrators. Yeah, sometimes I think we are overdoing it. This is the criticism to the many accreditation bodies. There's a bit of over exuberance in implementing OBE. Sometimes we talk about outcome-based education, but the process of accreditation of OBE is not outcome-based. It's very process-driven, right? So this is a critique for everybody. I think the accreditation team, they must also understand outcome rather than process. I think we need to be critical to each other, because they sometimes do a disservice to outcome-based education when we are actually looking too much into processes. So I do tell them sometimes that too much process, and we do not want to bring academics like Alfredo away from doing nurturing and mentoring and really making sure that the students learning the outcomes attain the outcome just because they don't have time, because there's too much administrative work that has to be done. But I will just touch about the system that Alfredo mentioned. Is a system that we created as we call it an academic management system. It's called COBES. It's Civil Engineering OBE system. It has evolved through several evolutions, and it attempts to assist the OBE steps, okay, to make it more of a culture and to make it more friendly. But there must be some regulating to it. So in USM, we give the liberty to the owner of the program to come up with any kind of assistance that they want to bring on, especially through technology or through systems. And this is actually diversifying the management of OBE at USM. So in fact, when I was in charge of academic, I made a decision that we shall liberalize the administration of OBE to allow the creativity of individual owners to do so. But sometimes people feel a standard way is better. So it remains to be seen which is better. But remember, OBE encourages creativity. So we should not be prescribing a lot too much. You know, we can ensure the outcomes are prescribed, but the way for us to achieve the outcomes should be given to the flexibility and the creativity of the owner. That's my response. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think you said it very correctly. I think if we can create the culture, it may take certain time, but if when the culture is done with a flexibility, empowerment, and that kind of scenario with a broader policy guidelines, I think it should be a long-term plan, especially with a rigid society like ours. Inshallah, we should be able to do that. There's a question from attendees, Rosalina. She has a question whether is Tallow free?
Yes, it's paid by public money. So it's paid by the European Commission. So it's free for everyone.
Okay. So that's the questions we have. And we just wanted to share. Believe me, I can hold both of you for another hour. So I have so many questions. It's an opportunity to get in touch. And I hope we remain connected, all of us. But I think we have reached an end of our session. Very, very involved. I really enjoyed. I'm sure many of the attendees. And the good thing, it's being recorded. So I'm sure many people will catch up, and they will probably have questions, and they will definitely ask on the thing. So we thank especially two of you and everyone who has been part of this workshop. Also our tech associate and everybody who had made it possible, the Infor OBE Global Virtual Summit. So I would request all our attendees also to review other agenda and other great presentation that is happening today and tomorrow, I believe. So we hope to be in touch. And again, thank you, Dr. Alfredo and Professor Farhan. It was a nice to meet and catch up and listen to all of your fantastic ideas that you have tried and you plan to try. Okay, then I can say good night.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good night. Good night from Malaysia.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Alfredo. See you.
Bye, Ahmad. Bye.